So basically, the problem that we're all aware of is that we don't have an infinite number of planets, and we are using the resources of the planet far, far, far more quickly than we really have any right to, and in any way that's sustainable. So that's our first problem. The second problem that we've got is, despite all of this wonderful resource usage that we're doing, there are still an awful lot of people on the planet whose basic needs are just not being met. So we're failing at both levels. We're using far too many resources, and we're not using our resources sufficiently to be able to give a good life to all of the people on the planet who need it. And there's a solution to one of these that completely destroys the other, and there's a solution to the other that completely destroys the first, and neither of those is very helpful. So what we want is to be able to look at both together, and that's what the donut allows us to do. So if you think of the planetary boundaries, the limits beyond which we shouldn't push, and if we think of that as a big outside circle, fab, thank you very much, Francis, which you can see, we've got the planetary boundaries on the outside, so climate change, land use change, nitrogen and phosphorus cycles, ocean acidification, all sorts of things there. And they were decided, an awful lot of research has gone into those, and some of those may well be familiar to all of you, because I think you know an awful lot about what's going on as far as climate change and the environmental situation is. So that's the outside bit. The inside bit is the social foundation. And these were loosely based on the Sustainable Development Goals. And so some of those will look fairly familiar to those of you who have any experience with the Sustainable Development Goals. So looking at basic education, access to energy, whether people have jobs, but keeping social equity and gender equality in mind as well. So those are the social foundations. And the way doughnut economics works, I guess, is, as Francis said, it provides us with a framework that says what we want to try and do is stay inside the green ring, which is the just and safe space for humanity. And one thing that we can do, and various people have done this in different ways to different extents, is you pick an indicator or a couple of indicators for each one of those little sectors of the circle that you can measure. You work out what your benchmark or sort of starting point or limit is going to be. And then we say, well, are we over this or are we under this? How are we doing? And you can then get some donut icons that look quite a bit like this, but have got red bars on the outside or the inside. So here in the UK, the social foundation tends to be pretty good. So we're mostly green in the middle of the donut there. A couple of places where we're not so brilliant, but it's really minor, sort of tiny little bit of red in those. But when it comes to some of the outside dimensions, the planetary dimensions, we are very red. So we're doing a terrible job. And then you can look at other countries, perhaps some of the nations in the global south, where on the environmental side of things, they're doing really well. They're within the planetary boundaries as far as resource usage is concerned, and pollution, biodiversity loss, etc. Except for a number of them, you've got a lot of people who are falling through the hole in the middle of the donut. So they're not meeting their basic needs as far as those social foundations are concerned. The book Doughnut Economics, that was written by Kate Raworth, then talks about different principles, about different ways that we can think about the economic system differently in order to try and get us into that space and staying in that space. So the donut icon itself isn't the be all end all, that's everything. The book talks about different ways of doing things. So being distributive by design, being regenerative by design, instead of looking at human beings as being rational economic man, but actually acknowledging that human beings do not work in the way that rational economic man tells us we should work. In fact, we never have worked in that way, and that we can be really collaborative, we can work well together, that our preferences and values are not fixed, that they change, that it's dynamic. Instead of thinking of economics as physics on steroids, what we want to do is think of the economic system as a much more complex system. It's not classical mechanics. But some of the original economists were interested in, I guess, giving it credence by making it look like a legitimate science, by drawing lots of graphs in and saying, these are the rules and this is how it works. And some of those are moderately useful as a sort of approximation of a particular thing, but what they're not good at doing is saying, this is how the entire world works. So Doughnut Economics, the book, gives us different ways of approaching the economy, the system, society, the way in which we work, the way we live, the way we function. Getting inside the donut is the aim of all of this. And we've got a group here in Cambridge, the Cambridge Doughnut Economics Action Group, who are a group of volunteers from different parts of Cambridge, different walks of life, who sort of gathered together in an attempt to understand doughnut economics better and to see what, if anything, we can do about it here in Cambridge.